Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is René Najera. I am the Director of Public Health for the College of Physicians of Philadelphia, and I have here with me two public health consultants. I have Leah Roman from Roman Public Health Consulting and Andrea Mantsios from Public Health Innovation and Action. So, hi, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Hi.
In the world of public health, we often talk about people who work in different settings, right? And this series is devoted to that, to getting people to know all the different ways in which people work in public health. And we have people who work for the government and people who work for academia, people who work for pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, et cetera. And you are working as consultants. And so my first question for you is, what is a public health consultant?
I'll just jump in and just make a clarification because I think sometimes it's confusing. There are consultants that work within a company, and they're different than independent consultants where we have our own companies. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think there's a lot of language that can be confusing. So some companies hire contractors just to fill in or to do a certain role. I still think of that as being different than an independent consultant, which is what we do, where someone has a particular problem that they want to solve, or they have a project where they need someone from the outside to come and lead that. That's different than a contract position that someone is hiring for, because we have a lot of autonomy in how we do the work, and that's different than a contractor you might bring in. Some people also call themselves freelancers, and sometimes they are people who just do a little work on the side. Sometimes there's independent consultants like we are, business owners, who also call themselves freelancers. So I think I just put it out there, not with a particular solution or like right way to talk about it, but I just think that can be confusing. But I think when we're talking about it today, we're talking about being an independent consultant. So we have our own companies, our own businesses, and a lot of autonomy in how we do the work for our clients.
Yeah, so thank you. That's good to know. And in doing so, your clients do range from all those things that I mentioned, from local, state governments to companies, NGOs, etc.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback on what Leah was saying. It's a really important clarification. And I think to loop back to your question, Renee, I would almost sum us up as kind of problem solvers.
Yeah.
Like public health consultants are coming into any of those kinds of sectors you mentioned. We can walk into any of those settings. We bring a special skill set that's needed, and we can help solve a problem or get a project over a finish line. Fill a gap. We can really come in on an as-needed basis for whoever that client is, sitting in whichever of those sectors you alluded to, and we help solve the problem at hand. It may be conducting a research study, it may be piloting a tool, it may be whatever that skill set is that you bring and it's your area of expertise, that specialty is needed. And that client is looking for you to come in, bring that specialty and help solve their problems, complete their project, carry it out with a new fresh set of eyes sometimes. That's really desirable for where they are at the stage in their work.
So let's go back to the beginning. How did you get it? And I know that your stories might be different between the two of you, but in general, how did you get into consulting?
For me, it was totally by accident. I didn't follow the type of advice I typically give people about being somewhat strategic going into consulting. That's not at all what I did. So I was working full time. It was just a really busy schedule, and I felt that it wasn't probably sustainable for the next phase of life I was going into, where we were thinking about having kids soon, and we had moved to the suburbs and the commute was longer. And so I was really just looking for something part-time while I focused on different areas of my life. Part-time work was really hard to find. That was at the level where I was currently working as a project manager. And so I had someone who I had done an informational interview with say to me, hey, like, this isn't part-time, but a colleague of mine at a college is looking for a consultant to come in and design and facilitate some focus groups. It's 4 or 5 months worth of work. Would you want to do that while you're figuring out your life? And I said, sure, I'll do that. So I got myself all set up as an L and got all the tax paperwork and everything figured out, because this particular university, you needed to have everything. I needed like a Philadelphia business license and all sorts of things. So I set myself up, but thinking it was just temporary. And then as I talked to other colleagues and just gave them a life update, they were like, oh, I didn't realize you were taking on consulting work. Like, I have this project or I have this project. So it snowballed. And then I ended up needing to work backwards. Oh, now I'm a consultant. I should have a business plan. Or like, now I'm a consultant. consultant. I need to figure out how I want to do this long term. So I went backwards, but fell into it. And then it just was a really good fit for me for a bunch of different reasons that we can certainly talk about. And so that was like 11 years ago now. So I'm still doing it.
And Andrea, how was it for you?
Yeah, so for me, it came about pretty organically. I don't think I knew what public health consulting was when I was in school. I wasn't like, oh, there's this career path called public health consulting that's an option on the table. It wasn't on my radar at all. I've actually been through several of the sectors you were just alluding to. Like I, throughout my public health career, had worked in government, I had worked in healthcare facilities, I had worked in academia, and I had tried them all on for fit and loved different things about them for different reasons. And about 5 years ago, when I was pregnant with my first child, I was at a crossroads of, am I going to continue? At that time, I was on faculty at a school of public health, and I knew what the path in academia looked like. I was like, oh, I'm going to apply for a K award, and the track of NIH funding would look like this. And it wasn't feeling right. So I reflected back on my prior experiences in the other sectors. Government, was I really going to go back to a 9 to 5 clock in, clock out for a local health department? Not probably where I was at, because I had just been in grad school for years of just like owning my own time. So it was just a reflection on kind of which of these things I did in the past would I go back to if I'm to leave the academic path right now? And none of them were quite right. I landed on this decision of, I kind of want to do all of those. I want to work with all of those sectors, but lifestyle-wise, about to have this baby, my partner and I are settling into this family life ahead. What lifestyle do I want with this? And all of that led me to say, what's this deal of public health consulting? I already do like all these different research projects for different people. If I were to leave academia and continue doing this type of work as an independent consultant, what would that look like? And to be honest, I feel like I jumped off a cliff because I really didn't know what this path was. And it's funny because I talk to a lot of current public health students now. I give talks on this career path, and I always say to them, when I was sitting in your seat, I didn't even know this existed. It's been a choose your own adventure. I've been like figuring it out as I go. I'm now in my 5th year, so I'm not quite as long as Leah, but like smitten with the choice. I'm just thrilled that I figured this out because it wasn't an option on my radar. So when I say organically, I literally just landed upon it one day when I was like, what would I do next if it's not one of these paths I've already tried out? And here I am.
So it sounds like the two of you have some characteristics in common, including self-starter, independent, organized. So what do you think are some of those other characteristics that somebody should have if they're looking at going into consulting on their own like that?
You mentioned some of them for sure. I think you do have to be pretty organized to still, because you're your own business manager until eventually maybe if you're making enough money and you want to hire somebody to help you with that. But you need to have everything. You're really doing everything. You're doing the content work, you're doing the networking, you're bringing the business in, you're looking at the contracts, like you're talking to the accountant about the taxes. So you're comfortable with trying a lot of different things that might push you out of your comfort zone. I also think to do this, you need to have some comfort with an uncertainty. You do not have a regular salary coming in, at least in many cases. I will say there are some consultants that have maybe only retainer packages. So retainer would be that a client is paying them every month for a particular service, and you can give yourself a more regular income and salary that way. But I think for many of us that do project work, there are times where you have more or less capacity, and so your income may fluctuate. And I think for a lot of people that can cause a lot of anxiety, but you have to have some comfort, I think, with that. So I would definitely put that out there, that if you are a person who cannot deal with that fluctuation or uncertainty, this might not be the ideal path for you.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's important that you said right off the bat, and what you were thinking of, Renee, self-starter and motivated is like huge, because as Leah's saying, there's no one else running the show here but you. You're doing it all. You're managing your time. You're getting everything done. So you definitely have to have the motivation, the drive, the self-starter nature to just jump in and do it. I think it's also important are you able to really be a team player with the people you're working with? And that's really the reason I bring it up, is because you're not really technically in any of these organizations that you're working with. But I think it's important as a consultant to be able to get in on the team mentality of whoever your client is, that we're going to solve this problem together. I don't think I've ever said to a client like, ooh, you guys really have a challenge on your hand. I'll do my best, but you guys have a lot of administrative barriers. I think you got to really think of yourself as a team player for your clients, to just jump in with them. And it's exciting because throughout my day, I'm on a team of with a pharmaceutical company, with a hospital team, with a community-based organization. I love that I can jump into each of these teams, but I really do adopt the team mentality with each of them. Like, wow, we didn't expect this barrier to arise. We've really got our hands full now. And I would never want them to feel alone. Like, we brought in this consultant, but truly we've got all these problems and I don't know how we're going to navigate them. I think to be a really good consultant, you have to jump into those problems without shying away from them, and be the team player with all the teams you join in your client work. So I guess I think that's an important one, to do your job really authentically.
So I imagine there's times when you just are not a good fit with something you take on, right? And I would imagine that You need to realize that and be honest with yourself and your client. What are some of those challenges of finding work and collaboration that works, and then what happens when it doesn't?
Great question. As you were talking, I was thinking about, because I think all of us have made mistakes, right? And think about maybe the red flags that we missed on a particular client or project. To your question of like, how do we find people and how do we make sure that they're the right match in both directions, our skill set for them and that they're a good fit for us. I've gotten better over the years of figuring out what are those screening questions I need to ask about to see if somebody's a good fit. And some of that's just on a basic level. So I work in e-learning design. Sometimes somebody's looking for a developer, which is actually not what I do. So sometimes at a basic level, you're just like, do I understand what they're looking for? And do I even offer that service, or do I have that expertise? I think there's other things that are more subtle. You know, when I talk to people, for example, about my approach and how I approach projects, you know, I am not an order taker. So if someone is like, I want an e-learning course and I want you to make 50 slides about this, and I'm inflexible on that, they're not open, and this actually happened. It sounds extreme, but actually this happens, and that person is not a good fit for me, right? I'm not going to make a non-strategic sort of garbage course because that's the order. I don't want to take money for doing that. They're not going to be happy. I'm not going to be happy. So I think having that initial conversation with people where you can see if they are open to hearing what you have to say. If they're not, I'm like, that's not a good fit. Sometimes I can even tell just in the initial conversation if someone is respectful of boundaries. Like, how are they about getting on my calendar in general? So I've made mistakes in the past where I have had some boundary issues with clients where I missed some of those red flags at the beginning, that they were going to push things out of scope or wanting me to do things on the weekends, like all sorts of stuff. So really getting a sense from people what their timeline is, how they work. When I present my parameters or boundaries, how do they respond to that? And so a lot of times now that I have a lot more experience, I can tell just in that initial conversation if we're going to be a good fit or if maybe I need to refer them elsewhere.
So when somebody is sitting in school working on their master's of public health, master's of science with a public health concentration, etc., and they're sitting there and they're wondering about their career, graduation is coming up. We're recording this in January, and I know that some of my students are already applying for jobs as May is coming up for their graduation. If they're looking ahead, as you both mentioned, you weren't thinking about this, you discovered it more after you already had graduated. But if you have somebody watching this and they're like, oh, that is something that I might want to look into, what do you think are some of those first steps of exploring the idea of becoming a consultant?
You want to go first?
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. First comment, and this would, I think, depend if someone was getting their master's maybe straight from undergrad versus somebody who went to get their master's after they had worked out in the field a little while. But from the perspective, I get a lot of questions from students who have gone right from undergrad to grad school, and they're like, oh, when I graduate, I want my own business. And again, there's no right and wrong, like black or white on this, but I will say my instinct and my experience is that I personally wouldn't jump right to this from school if you don't have work experience. And I would say significant work experience, because you are coming in, as Andrea said, as a problem solver, as an expert when people hire you. And so if you have never worked anywhere, or you've had a couple of internships, it's going to be very hard to sell yourself as an expert coming in to solve a problem. And the other piece is remembering the business side of it. You have to do a lot of hard things when you run your business in terms of having the confidence you're negotiating contracts. People may try to lowball you. People may try to give you a contract that doesn't protect you. It only protects them. People may go outside of the scope of work. This will definitely happen, will not pay you on time, and you have to be after them. So you have to do a lot of leadership activities to really advocate for yourself as a business owner. And I think about myself as like a new grad and I had worked just 1 year in between my undergrad and my MPH. I do not think that I would have had the experience, the confidence, the skill set to do all of those things as a new grad. So I guess that would be my first piece of advice, is get yourself some really good work experience, ideally in a variety of different settings, so that if you do have different clients in the future, you can talk about your work in different settings. There's also a lot of public health consultants, like in and I'm happy to talk about this a little bit. I run a networking group for independent consultants. There's a bunch of them that bring in interns and part-time or full-time staff. So if you're really interested in this, I would follow some of those people on LinkedIn, because they're often opening up opportunities. So see if you can collaborate with them or work with them in some way. I think that would be fantastic job experience.
So yes to everything you just said. Thumbs up, +1 on all of that. I would echo, and very importantly, the experience piece, not just because I can't imagine my younger self doing some of the negotiating that Leah is speaking to. So certainly some maturity and experience in the field helps with that, but also just to even be the best consultant with your skill set that you can possibly be. It's so helpful to bring perspective from all the projects where you've worked on, all the clients you've worked with. So I'm a qualitative researcher. Qualitative methods are my jam. I love them to pieces. When I left from my training in qualitative methods, sure, I knew how to do them very well, but I have been for years and years, actually now going on decades, of working in qualitative research methods in so many different settings and on different types of projects that it's hard for me to get a project that comes across my plate that I can't relate to. Oh my gosh, once I did something that would be so helpful to think about as I put together this project. So the more experience you have over the years of being out in the world doing whatever your specific skill set is, or in your particular health topic of interest, the better you get at bringing all those perspectives from over the years of working on that to your next client. And it just makes you that much more well-rounded. And as Leah said, you really can show up as an expert. Like, I have done something like this before, or I have done something that I can connect this to in my past, where I really offer something unique that I'm bringing to the table here. And that just makes you that much better in your role as a consultant for your client. So I would underscore that. And also, now I don't even want to go into this because this is so Leah's territory, as the master kind of mother of public health. She is the connector of all connectors. But I would just say,
that was going to be my next question, was going to be about networking.
And really, truly, you should be the one to speak to this, Leah, but I just want to put it out there for us to now segue into, because it's so critical that, like, with more years of experience, the more connections you make, the bigger your network grows. And that is the heart of networking for job opportunities, networking for that next client that will hire you. So I would just use that now as a springboard for you to take it and run, Leah. But I just think what we're saying is the more experience you have growing your network and getting real world practical experience, the better you are to go into this. So the key message I would say to students before Leah takes that and runs with it is try to make as many peer connections with professors, the faculty members you feel aligned with in their work. Try to get internships with on the projects you want to work on with faculty members and at public health consultancies like Leah mentioned. So those are all things you can do as a current student to start preparing yourself for this path.
Yeah. Oh, and one other thing I'd mention before we talk about networking is that I did not take advantage of this when I was at BU, at Boston University, which is where I did my MPH. There are classes within the School of Public Health. They may be in a different concentration, or there may be in other parts of the school, like in the business school, where you can take some classes in project management, budgeting, like other kinds of like leadership classes. That would be super helpful when you become a consultant. I like very specifically remember seeing a budgeting, I think it was more focused on grant writing, but like a budgeting class in the health management department. And I was like, I don't see you, I'm in health education. And like kicking myself later, that super practical thing would have been awesome, because we are writing budgets. We are, budgeting for our own businesses. We are writing proposals that may have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of a budget. So all those kinds of business skills, if you have time in your schedule and the ability to take some of those other like management, project management, budget, all that stuff, I would take them all, even if they sound boring, because you will thank us later that you did that.
100%.
Yeah.
I was also going to ask you along the same lines of creating the network for you. How do you put yourself out there? What kind of personal obstacles do you need to overcome to put your work out there and advertise yourself to the world?
That's a great question. I think like other parts of the business, you have to have kind of a thick skin that if you do put things out, you might have people say not nice things, like they might disagree with you on social media or on your blog. And I think just in general, it even just takes courage just to put your website up and be like, because you really are saying, I'm an expert, hire me. And I think for some people, just saying that is uncomfortable at first. So you do have to have some comfort, or at least ability to push past that discomfort, to put yourself out there. I will say, I think there is pressure to put yourself everywhere. You're on LinkedIn, you're on, it's not Twitter anymore, but it used to be Twitter. You're on Instagram, you're making videos. And I think people feel like they have to be everywhere. One thing I would encourage people to think about is, who are you selling to and what are you selling? Because that matters. You put yourself out there. For example, some of the consultants in our networking group, they make products that they sell to individuals. So they may create a course and that it's marketed to individuals. And I have done this as well. I used to have a course that I sold about how to become a public health consultant. And when you're selling to individuals, you need a really large audience because a very small amount of those people will actually purchase your product. So you might need a newsletter and an Instagram following and whatever that has thousands of people on it, so that if 2% of them buy your course, you're actually making money. But if you're not selling to individuals, you're trying to recruit clients, and maybe you only need 4 to 8 clients a year, and a lot of them are repeats. Like, you're fine just being on LinkedIn and talking about your work. And that's actually a shift that I've made. So when I was selling to individuals, I did have a monthly newsletter. I was really active on Instagram, and I was connecting with individuals all the time. Now that I've shifted to working in e-learning and my clients are really different and they're not individual people, I have totally shifted. I do have a blog on my website, but I'm just focused on LinkedIn right now, because if you're just trying to make so much content for all these different audiences, that really takes away from your work. So in terms of everything, you want to be strategic about it. So when you start to think about, how am I putting myself out there, it's like everything, like who's your audience, who are you trying to sell to? And you actually don't need to be everywhere. So I feel like that's the best piece of advice, because a lot of especially new consultants, they're everywhere. They've got YouTube channel, they've got a million things going on, but they might not need that. And it takes an enormous amount of time and energy to do that much content.
Yeah, I would certainly echo that, Leah. I think that it's both important to tailor it to what you really need to be doing, and you can also tailor it to more along the lines of what you're personally most comfortable with. So I'm wildly extroverted in person, but I'm like an online introvert. I don't know. That was just like not something that came easily to me, to start having some sort of online presence. And I'm like, I could talk all day to someone about how much I love my work, how much I could do working with their organization. There's no shortage of things for me to say about how much I would love to be your public health consultant if I'm in a conversation with you standing on the street or anywhere in person. Online, I'm challenged in how to have interactions that really do justice to my personality or the passion I'm bringing to what I want to say. So for me, it's pushing myself out of my comfort zone enough to even just have a LinkedIn presence. I am not working the phones on all the various mediums and trying to be in everybody's faces. A, because that's just not where I am comfort-wise, and B, because I'm also, like Leah said, trying to be strategic. I don't actually need to be everywhere. I don't have a product to sell. I have a service that I want to bring to people where it's most relevant. So my specific skill set isn't going to solve everybody's problems. It's going to solve the problems of a certain set of people. And so I use my network, which also allows me to have more one-on-one personal interactions with people I know, or they're people who know the people I know. So it's within referrals. And so that allows me to be my more authentic self. And that feels better to me, because right from the get-go, one of the things I was least comfortable with about starting a consultancy was the sales part. I'm like, wait, what? I have to pitch myself and be like, hey, hire me. So that never really jived with who I wanted to be. And so I've had to find a way of how do I present who I am in a way that feels authentically me? And at the end of the day, I'm always going to be more comfortable having one-on-one interactions with people. And so I try to use my business development framework to best suit my strengths and be focused. So I'm not wasting my time being on every medium to reach every single person in the world, and that's really not going to serve me.
And so the other side of that coin is, how does a business or an organization know that they need a consultant over just hiring somebody and bringing in somebody, training them and getting them going?
Yeah, I think it's about the problem that they have. So sometimes people, so for instance, with doing e-learning design, some of them have instructional design. Some public health organizations do have instructional designers, but a lot of them don't. Part of their problem is that they don't have somebody on staff. It doesn't make sense for them to bring somebody on staff if they just have a short-term project of some, or a special project of some kind. So I think, so they often know it just based on the time frame. Okay, we could bring in a salaried person, but that doesn't make sense because we won't need them past this date. So sometimes they just need me for that that. Sometimes they also just maybe need you, not even for a big project, but they just want to consult with you. They just want to pick your brain about something. So they don't even need you to necessarily do the work for them, but they want some guidance on how to do the work. So I offer different levels of service. So I have these pick my brain types of sessions with people, which Andrea's actually done, which is fun, where they can say, we're working on this project, we're going to do it ourselves, but we need some help getting started, or we want your opinion on this, or whatever. So they can bring you in for that. Or they could say, in the next 6 months, we need to design this e-learning course. So I think that they know that they need somebody from the outside when it's not a skill or a person that they have internally, and it doesn't make sense for them to hire somebody as an employee for a variety of reasons. Or they also might need, just as Andrea mentioned before, just an external person to come in with fresh eyes. They know that they've maybe gotten as far as they can get with what they have internally, and they want to bring you in for that. Sometimes they just don't have the capacity, like me. I've also worked with people who they do have some, not necessarily, though I'm trying to think of the ones I've worked on, maybe didn't have instructional designers, but they had people on a training team, like a training and health education team, so they had some shared skill sets with me, but they didn't have the capacity to take on anything else, so they brought me in. Or they had not done e-learning specifically, and they wanted me to come in and help lead that, for their team of related skill sets. So I think there's a bunch of different reasons where they would identify that it made sense for them from a capacity or a financial perspective to bring in an independent consultant. What would you add to that, Andrea?
In terms of my experiences and what I've seen, I think sometimes it evolves in the conversations you're having with the folks. So I can think of 2 instances off the top of my head where someone contacted me to engage me to do qualitative research for them on an international study. And I had 10,000 questions from an IRB perspective for them. And they were like, oh, snap, we didn't think of any of that. And let's back up and I'll start you from the process that you should be doing. So then that gave us an opportunity to have me start with them sooner, which they really needed that support on, and they didn't even know they needed it. So it organically came to be a very fruitful partnership because they didn't even know what they needed to know. And I was able to help them identify it. And on another occasion, this was a client that was in biotech, which I never imagined I would be working with, but it was an awesome opportunity as they had a qualitative research need for helping support the patients that they were serving. And they thought they were going to employ me and my team to come in and do the research. And in the end, we ended up training their folks to do qualitative research. I oversaw all their coding. I did sessions with them on how to do better coding and what you might be doing differently. And so we could build capacity for them to do it internally. And that wasn't part of the initial conversation. So those are 2 instances of, if a client knows enough to know they want to work with you because you have that skill set they need, it can open up doors for a bigger project than they might even know they need. But by you being able to listen very intently to what are their needs and what is their challenge at hand, you can identify, oh, okay, I actually see a bigger picture than what you've talked about so far. Maybe I can support you in the following ways. And that often leads to more meaningful partnership.
Yeah. People don't always know what they need. And I think that's such an important point that you're making. Sometimes people say, get in touch with me and we'll get on the initial call. And they're like, I need help with this, but I don't totally know what I need. And then when you present to them some different options or ways that they can collaborate with you, then they have this menu of things to pick from, and they can pick what works with. Sometimes it's financially driven, where they're like, in a perfect world, I would hire you to do it, but I don't have that much money. Can you do a training for my team, or can you oversee this, or can we have you we created this course, but can you do an audit of the course, and then we can make some improvements based on what you said. So a lot of times people they're not always sure what you can offer exactly. And so presenting those options, having different levels of service, I have found to be really helpful. I ended up having a client last year go through kind of one level of service led to another. And I don't know that I was that strategic when I designed it, but I was like, look how it works, where we had a pick your brain, a bunch of those, and she was like, ooh, this is great. Okay, can you audit this course? Okay. Then I audited the course, and then she was like, can you actually fix the things that you recommended? And then she hired me to fix the things I recommended. So I think when you have different ways that people can work with you, that's another really nice way to design your services, and people can figure out what they need and test you out. How do they like working with you? And also, is it a good fit?
Yeah, and just building on that for one quick second, I just want to say, I think that's the dream, right? That's the dream scenario, because I personally don't want to just like parachute in and parachute out. I'm in relationship building and seeing projects through. And so if I have enough foresight to think down the line, when we get the results from this particular survey or evaluation we're developing, what would be the next steps for a program that we could design? If you can give it that thought right from the get-go, you can even present to clients like, I see a long time for us to work together. Look at the landscape ahead. And that's how I want to work with people, because I'm building relationships with these folks because I want to work with them. That's another beautiful thing about being an independent consultant. You don't have to work with who you don't want to work with, and you do get to work with who you do want to work with. It's simple as that. But as we said earlier, if you see those red flags, wow, that is not going to be a great relationship. On the other hand, you have those feel-good clients where you're like, I love the work you do. I love supporting the work you do. We have a great dynamic. We're super efficient together. This is a beautiful matrimony. Like that's the kind of folks I want to keep working for. So it's really great to hear you say that, Leah. And that's what I find are my most successful connections with folks to start working with them, is when I see a long-term horizon. Like we could work together on so many phases of this. And as a consultant, it's in your best interest to think about long-term. How could I support these folks through? A pick your brain session is perfect to lead to a how could we address this problem? And then how could we potentially evaluate if it's working? And then what are we going to do with those results? To just building blocks one upon another for how you could keep helping your clients achieve what they're looking to do.
So if anybody wants to get in touch with you after seeing you on this video and they're like, oh, I want to pick their brains, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
You can do it a couple different ways through my website, romanphconsulting.com. There's a contact form on there. You can do that. I'm also on LinkedIn, so that's always a good place. Speaking of LinkedIn, and this kind of gets to our networking, this question of networking on LinkedIn and asking about advice for students in doing so. So when you connect with somebody on LinkedIn, or you want to connect with somebody on LinkedIn, please include a note with your invitation that said, so if you wanted to connect with me to say, I heard you on this, on the YouTube show, and I'm super interested in consulting. So personalize it so we know like why you're interested, who you are. I get so many invitations from people that I have no idea who they are. I would say 99% don't have any notes. And there's actually a place on my LinkedIn where I said, if I don't know you, put a note, because I actually like to keep my network a little bit smaller so that when I'm in my feed, I'm seeing things that I want to see and not a bunch of people I have no idea who they are. And most people don't include a note. So I think advice for your students for networking, you really stand out if you write a personalized note to the person that you're wanting to connect with about why you want to connect with them, how you found their work, and things like that. But that's where you can find me most frequently, is on LinkedIn. Certainly find me on there.
Same. I'm on LinkedIn. I love a good DM with a personal note.
I love a personal note. Yeah.
Really enjoy
excited.
that.
Yeah.
Brings it to life for me. I'm like, oh, I'm not just like any old person. This person took a minute. This is great. Also, please, we're welcome to join me in my website, contact us form as well. So I would direct you there. So again, my consultancy is Public Health Innovation in Action, which we lovingly call FIA. So it's fiaconsulting.org. And on the contact us page, you can send me a note there, and would love to be in touch.
All right, great. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I really appreciate it. I think we're going to have to do this again and tell some of those war stories of going from one place to another, putting things right where they once went wrong, because I haven't done it as a consultant. I've done it as an employee of so many health departments and little things like that. So maybe we'll record that one too. So thank you so much again. My guests today have been Leah Roman from Roman Public Health Consulting and Andrea Mantsios from Public Health Innovation and Action, because without action, public health is pointless, right? We need to get stuff done. Thank you again. I really appreciate it. We'll have another episode coming up soon. College of Physicians of Philadelphia. I am René Najera. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.